Yes, okay. So I think we're about to start the last session. We will have the panel discussion on the strategy and perspective of RILEM, which will be chaired by RILEM Implementation Manager, Dr. Daniela Ciancio. I think we're still missing a few of you now. John is now connecting. All the participants have received an invitation to be panelists, so please look in your Zoom, and I think well, I think everybody's here. I'll let you, Daniela, for this last session.
Thank you so much, Judith, and welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I can see 157 of you connected, so I assume from different parts of the world. I would like to start the session 3, the second last of today, before the final concluding remark of Ravindra, by introducing to everyone the speakers of this panel. We are starting session 3, Strategy and Perspective of RILEM, and I have the honor to have here 8 very active RILEM officers. So I would like to start from Nicolas, Roussel, RILEM President, and then Nele de Belie, RILEM Vice President. Then we'll continue with Karen Scrivener, the Chair of the Educational Activities Committee, and then Enrico Sassoni, the Chair of the Technical Activities Committee, Hans Beushausen, the Chair of the Development Advisory Committee. These 3 committees are also called standing committees, ESC, DAC, and TAC. And then I have Joanitta and Ndawula. Joanitta is the chair of the recently established RILEM Youth Council. And then Alexandra Bertron, the editor-in-chief of RILEM Technical Letter, and John Provis, editor-in-chief of Material and Structures. Karen cannot turn video. We can see you, Karen. So your video is on. Okay.
It's just a photo of me. It's not really me.
I can see you. So I would like to start with some simple housekeeping. Please make sure that you post your question in the box of the Q&A. I'm not multifunctioning. If you post in the chat box, I will not read it. So I only have the box of the Q&A open. Thank you. And also, I would like to start by saying that we will have a discussion today about certain topics that have been widely discussed in the standing committees of RILEM. So some of these topics are put on this discussion, and they represent the outcomes of a discussion that has been collectively agreed on by RILEM members, but others are just represent the personal point of view of the speakers. And I think that then we can start with the discussion. So this, as I said before, this is a strategy and perspective of RILEM in this session. So we have listened to outstanding presentations today, very much technical oriented. So we talk about the traditional topics of RILEM, but also some new topics of RILEM. We will continue to stay in the technical context, but we will look at RILEM and the society under this umbrella of the technicality of RILEM, but also we will look at RILEM and its members, because just to not forget, the RILEM is not a logo, is not an abstract thing, but RILEM is made of people, and many of these people are connected today. So starting with RILEM and the society, RILEM outside. As many of you are familiar with the goals of RILEM and the mission of RILEM, and one of these goals is the transfer of knowledge. And I think that the main channel that RILEM used to communicate this knowledge is through its journals. So I would like to start to talk about Material and Structure, the RILEM flagship journal. And I'm so pleased to have here John. John, would you like to tell us something more about Material and Structure? How is it going? How is the situation of this journal?
I think materials and structures as a flagship and a highlight for RILEM has, through the very, very hard work of successive editors. I'm the one who holds that chair at the moment, but I'm by no means responsible for the growth of the journal over the past decade or so. It is a really good quality journal. We publish good quality work. We highlight excellent outcomes from RILEM. The work is highly visible. It looks nice in print, which is actually an important thing as well. And if I can start by waving the flag and saying, all members of RILEM and people interested in RILEM who may not be members, please think of materials and structures as somewhere to send some of your best work. It's a highly selective journal. So we publish about 15% of the papers we submit, which means when the papers are being published in materials and structures, it is because they are selected specifically as a representation of the highest quality of work. The editorial board are top scientists and engineers. The visibility within and beyond the organization is great. And we're involved in the transformational process, which the publisher Springer is doing, moving towards an open access publication, increasingly publishing open access articles through national deals and other pathways. And we're particularly focused on getting the RILEM results accessible to as many people as we can. So RILEM TC papers, each year we offer the opportunity for the LERMIT medalists to highlight their work in a review article in the journal. And we've recently published one from Claudia de Weert, who was last year's medalist. I encourage you to look that one up. It's a really good article. But as a starting point and as a contribution, both of the broader community to RILEM and a contribution of RILEM back to the broader community, I would like to say that we should be very proud of materials and structures as a journal and as a publication outlet, and as a way for us to show people all the exciting things we're doing in our TCs and in our own laboratories and research lines to highlight just what can be done in this space.
And there are many exciting things to communicate, John. I agree with you.
I think that's entirely enough monologue from me.
You mentioned something before that material and structure is in this transition process, moving towards a fully open access journal. This is the trend. Open access was discussed probably for the first time inside RILEM during the strategic workshop in 2013. And then something happens after the day, Nicolas, do you remember?
Oh, yes, it feels like yesterday. Well, open access from the beginning is something very seducing for RILEM, as we mentioned today several times. One of the goals of the association is to provide a general access to knowledge. So, of course, if this access is free, that's very seducing. And the role of the standing committees or previous director of development, Gerd de Schutter, the presidency, is to keep an eye on this kind of question. So when we felt ready, we wanted to give it a try. But, well, John described material structure. It is one of the treasures of the association, a flagship journal. So we couldn't really play and experiment on such a established journal. So we decided in 2016 to launch an initiative, a sort of lab rat, in fact, something on which we could try new ways of disseminating knowledge without putting at risk our main journal and our main means of knowledge dissemination. That's why in 2016 we tried RILEM Technical Letters with a very strong support both from RILEM, of course, but as well from people at EMPA like Mateusz, who really got involved into launching this initiative. So we explored a bit how to do that, and then I was really happy that a few years ago the resulting lab rat that had grown already, that become a very big lab rat, was transferred to in the expert hands of Alexandra, who is now editor-in-chief of this official full journal. Of course, not publishing many papers compared to Matthews and Structure, but doing that in a very steady way and with a very large reach in terms of paper dissemination.
And since Alexandra is here, I think it would be great to hear from us something more about this journal. I noticed that there is a question, but I will go back to the question after we conclude the presentation of the journals. Please, Alexandra.
Yeah, thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Nicolas, for the introduction about HTL. So Nicolas was co-founder of the RILEM Technical Letters. You understood that the idea with RILEM Technical Letters is to give the floor to our RILEM members, our experts, to provide a new channel of expression and communication around our research activities, and a channel that is freer than that of our traditional scientific journals, and that the messages are accessible to a wider audience through open access. So you may know that paper submission is made on invitation or abstract proposals that are assessed by the board of editors. And here the associate editors have a strong role in the editorial policy of the journal, since their mission is to identify hot topic and potential authors, and possibly international teams of authors among renowned and or promising scientists on these topics in the community. So typically we publish review papers, viewpoint papers on hot and emerging topics. We publish awarded paper in some RILEM events, and especially we publish the papers by the Colonnity medalist. You could see the presentation in the afternoon. We also started an interesting series, regional papers that aim to highlight research issues and further challenges at the level of RILEM world region. So we previously published a paper on the sub-Saharan Africa region, coordinated by Wolfram Schmidt. You also heard this afternoon about the paper drafted by about Europe by Karen Scrivener and Christophe Levy. Other papers are in the pipeline, and our ambition in the next year is to put some highlight on our promising young researchers. It is already done through the Colonnity medalist papers, but we would like also to give the opportunity to some scientists in the different RILEM regions to have some to have some light on their work. Now my question, and the question I think of the RILEM officers in general is, what can we do to increase the target of the audience? Can we reach a wider audience in society? How can we help to disseminate the results of the research activities carried out within RILEM? This is my question for further year.
It's a very interesting question, how to reach out more people and how to put in good practice the outcomes of the technical outcomes of RILEM. Talking about questions before we move into another topic, John, there is a question from you from the audience. Pranoy Soraneni would like you to ask more about the future of the topical collections. Will we see more topical collection of special issues in material and structures?
I very much hope so. Our focus with setting up topical collections, which is it's the preferred terminology for what used to be a special issue now, and I'll wrap back around to why that is. Our focus for those is to use those as highlights for TC outcomes. So where a TC is publishing a cluster of, let's say, roughly 4 to 6 papers coming through, and they don't have to be all at the same point in time. That's one of the real advantages of the topical collection structure. All the outputs from that TC can be collected together into a topical collection and highlighted and published in that way. We have recently published a topical collection on to celebrate the 75th anniversary of RILEM. which I encourage everybody to go and have a look at. It's got sort of short kind of summary highlight articles, picking out the top 20 or so articles in the history of materials and structures as judged on citation impact and various other criteria that we looked at across all of the domains covered by the journal, and really pointing out what the journal's contributed and how RILEM has contributed to that, and how those articles have actually fed back into the ongoing work of RILEM and new TC developments and things like that. So that type of thing, that's just come through as a topical collection. We are not specifically looking to launch a whole lot of additional special issues or additional topical collections beyond that. There is a trend in some journals towards a very large number of special issue type things, each with their own guest editor and invited authors based on that. That's not particularly a model that I'm excited by. Some of the journals that do that do it very well. Some of the journals that do that overdo it, and it spoils their reputation a little bit. So it's something I'm a bit cautious about, and I'd really rather keep it as a proper highlight and as a really important thing to be part of a topical collection. So that's part of my view on that. The reason why we're doing it as a collection rather than a special issue is with the continuous publication system we have, so every article being published in order when it comes through, it saves us the age-old problem of special issues of we've had 12 articles we're expecting to come through, 9 of them are published, and the last 3 delay everything for 9 or 12 or 18 months. Mm. So rather than having articles lingering in articles in press section awaiting finalization of a special issue,
yes,
the real strength of the topical collection model is that the articles are published as they come through and allocated separately. Yeah,
sure, fantastic. Thank you, John. Alexandra, I'm glad that you mentioned your question, how we can better disseminate the knowledge of RILEM. I think it has, this goes under the very big umbrella that is science popularization. And nowadays is something that is getting more and more common, in which even the research funds ask the researchers to involve more the non-technical people, non-scientists, in disseminating the research outcomes, but also in being part of the research itself. Nele, would you like to say something about this?
Well, if you're talking about involving citizen science, so involving unskilled people into the research, that's actually not new. That is used to create a database. For instance, we can think of medical science where they have been doing participatory research for decades with test groups and so on. I can think of evaluation of new products where test panels can be trained and used actually as an instrument. So we can really also move this more into engineering and bioengineering disciplines. For instance, I know colleagues who have been distributing strawberry plants to citizens to put on their balcony. So it could collect over time some particulate matter on the leaves. So they could then later make an analysis of the environmental health in relation to the location of the plants. Mm-hmm. And also actually more related to the topics of RILEM, the creation of living labs. For instance, the Flemish Institute for Technological Research, they investigate smart cities, and then they need a controllable real environment to test technological innovations. And then, for instance, this includes integration of renewable energy in urban environment. So, for instance, district heating, large-scale photovoltaics, smart district components for air quality, aggregated renovation programs. So this is really a smart city that is really inhabited by real people who contribute to data collection. And I think also the NEST initiative at EMPA has already been in the newsletter. So they really have this test house where different innovations can be tested by inhabitants of the house. So I think such topics can also be relevant for RILEM. And therefore, citizen science may be a means that could be of use to some technical committees, of course, not to all. And I think in addition, we want to attract more young people to RILEM, and it should start from a really early age to make our young people interested in science, attract them to engineering studies. So with those type of initiatives, you make science more visible to the general public already from early age, I think.
I want to talk about young members. We will go there later on. My personal point of view is that I'm not sure if RILEM is ready to open the membership to not technical people, but I think it's definitely ready for multidisciplinary. So we definitely, the participatory research, the way I see that is we really need more than chemists and engineers and architects. We really have to broaden up the disciplines, the skills in RILEM. To make everyone more involved. But also, the second aspect of this topic is reaching out. And Karen has launched last year a wonderful initiative that turned out to be super successful, which is the Rock and Talk webinar series. Karen, would you like to tell us something about this and the audience of this series of webinar? I think someone has to unmute.
Yeah. So, sorry, yes, of course, I would love to tell people about this. And of course, now, due to the pandemic, many things have gone online. But in fact, this Rock and Talk was conceived before the pandemic as a webinar to really promote access to people. And I think here it's been very successful because the number of countries where people are participating from is, absolutely vast. Countries that, it would not be practical to go to do conferences there all the time. It's aimed at PhD students and young lecturers, but I mean, this is just the first aim. And I think depending on the content, the videos are then posted on the YouTube site. I use quite a lot of them as source material for my undergraduate lectures. Even when journalists contact me and saying, well, what are you doing about CO2? I say, well, I'm very happy to talk to you, but please watch this video first because this explains a lot of the things. So I think this is a great resource we're building up. And on the general area, it's particularly when we're confronting these really difficult challenges like climate change, it's really important to explain to the public at large why we do what we do and what are the choices we have to make. So I really hope we can go on with this and reach a wider and wider audience.
And this is what is happening with the new initiative of RILEM, in which you are involved with in the front line, which is Globe.
Yes, sorry, thank you. So I think this Globe consensus, I mean, Wolfram presented it really well. I really would encourage people to watch back its presentation. We have this huge proliferation of reports out there about CO2 and what we should do about it. I think where Globe can contribute is it brings together a lot it brings together the support of a lot of professional organizations such as RILEM, such as IABSE, such as FIB, Fédération Internationale de Béton, etc. And sorry for the ones I left out, but it's really independent of this. So, we still have to see exactly how we're going to do it, and it's going to be a huge challenge. But I really hope as our first output in the next few months, we can produce some kind of document and also online, which provides a very simple summary of what are the real blocking points to implementing low CO2. Because Guillaume Abbé and I wrote a report a few years ago where we calculated that we could reduce CO2 emissions by even up to 80% of what they are today with existing technologies, but these are not being implemented. And, the obstacles are many and various, but mainly they involve bridging gaps between different parts of the value chain. So, for example, between cement producers and concrete producers and designers, etc. And I think that's really what we want to do in the Globe consensus, as Wolfram presented. you know, it's not practical for everybody to come to the workshop, but we do welcome your contributions online. We already had a webinar back in January, and after the workshop, we will have another one so that people can give their input.
And all the information about these events in the on the RILEM website, in the agenda. So feel free to have a look at the dates and what has been done so far. Thank you so much, Karen. But I understand. I only joined RILEM in 2019, but I understand that RILEM is very familiar with the topic of the environment, preserving the environment. Nele, do you think you might, as former TAC chair, do you think you might present an overview of how the current and past technical committees have treated this topic?
Yeah, well, actually, sustainability and environmental concerns are really not new in RILEM. Actually, one of the first technical committees I joined was on environment conscious construction materials and systems. That was the ECM committee starting in 2001. So that's already quite a while ago, but the topics that they had in their focus are still very relevant today, like application of natural resources as construction materials, systems for minimizing environmental loads in materials production, development of environment conscious materials and systems, including carbon dioxide, chloride absorbing materials, green concrete, meaning then really green as support for plants. And there have been before that and after that many more committees on environmental impacts. I saw in 1996 there were 3 TCs running in parallel on environmental criteria and design. And later also in 2012, there was a TC on environmental evaluation of concrete structures. And then if we think of the different relevant topics, there are really a lot of TCs focusing on byproducts to partially replace Portland cement since the early days, including fly ashes, different mineral raw materials, later on alkali activated materials. And then all the TCs on durability of all the different materials like concrete, masonry, timber, bitumen, composites, metallic structural materials. And durability is, of course, very relevant to sustainability, because if a structure doesn't reach its foreseen service life, it's creating a lot of demolition waste and problems with repair and so on. I've seen at least 4 TCs on service life itself as well, including the current one, FTC, on service life under the influence of freeze-thaw cycles combined with chloride penetration. Also on recycling, at least 4 TCs, including running ones, and actually a just approved one on asphalt recycling. Several on natural materials like agro-based materials, that's also a currently running one. And now in TAC, we just approved 3 new ones on earth-based materials. And then also some related to reduction of environmental impacts, like by TiO2 photocatalysis to reduce pollution in the air. And also, again, a new one, because we have been approving quite some new TCs. So that will be soon on the website for people who are interested to join. So there will be also a new one on mineral carbonation. So that includes carbon dioxide injection, really as a binder, which will then contribute to carbon storage. So that's really quite some TCs on this topic, and actually the complete cluster D as well, which is named Service Life and Environmental Impact Assessment, is the home for TCs related to environmental issues.
I'm thinking about the RILEM member who are the that proposed those TC that were recently approved. They are jumping now because they haven't received official email confirming, congratulations, your TC has been approved by TAC. So it's a nice way to find out that their proposal is being approved. So it seems, Nele, that from your answer, we can state that RILEM members are very sensitive to the environment, and it's a topic that it's well inside the technical committees, many technical committees. But you finished your mandate at TAC chair because you became a RILEM vice president in September. Now we have here Enrico, that since September last year is the new TAC chair. Enrico, is anything happening in TAC and in the procedure of the establishment of a technical committee that is affected by the environment and the sustainability issue?
Yes, Daniela, of course, as we all know, more or less, unfortunately, the environmental issues are becoming more and more important. So also this also reflects on TACT and the new TCs, of course. So something that we thought about it was to, for the future TCs, to specifically ask if and how they are related to the environmental issues, also because this would help us as TAC to monitor, to track what the TCs are more or less linked to this topic, so the topic of sustainability, environmental issues, and so on. So to also have, let's say, interconnections between each other. So what TAC recently approved, like a couple of days ago, is that in the proposals for future TCs, we will add like a specific item about environmental issues, environmental sustainability. So we will ask the new TCs to make a statement about how they relate to these topics. Of course, depending on the specific subject, there are TCs that are more or less closely linked to the environmental issues, but still it's something that we think it's important to keep an eye on. So yes, also for the future, we will ask the TCs to reason about this. And as Nele just mentioned, just like a couple of days ago, we approved 8 new TCs and 4 or 5 of them closely relate to this topic. So again, I think this is a demonstration of how, not ourselves, but the scientific society has these issues as very present. And so we are, let's say, proactive about this.
It's good to hear. Thank you, Enrico. We have a question from the audience. And so I think that, Nicolas, this is a question for you. Lots of great scientific and technological work is messed up on the job site. How can we introduce passion for construction materials with those that are practicing on job site? And can we do better than those fun but outdated, not practical concrete canoe races?
Well, so first, I have to admit that I really love the canoe races. It's a great challenge.
Do you think it's the case to explain to the audience in case they are not familiar, or probably
well,
majority of RILEM members know?
Many people know that, but some students, mostly from some engineering training universities, are developing some canoe and are competing in a race. And I know at least 2 versions of this. One is mostly North American, very centered on Canada, and another one is centered on Switzerland, Germany, Austria. Maybe there are some others, but that's the 2 I know, and I think it's always a very, very cool competition. But indeed, it's well, it exists. It already existed when I was a student. I remember that back then I was really wondering what these people were doing. I think that today we have the opportunity maybe to bring some young people. I'm not speaking about PhD students because often they are very much driven by science and understanding and curiosity, but people who don't know much concrete, it seems to me that they are very much driven by this digital revolution. So I think that 3D printing, and I have many examples of this, has brought in the field of concrete and construction materials many students, because of the freedom and it offers, and the feels that it is something totally new. And I think as well, it allows people to build something very quickly. And I've seen some students developing some furnitures, some part of a staircase, this kind of thing. Of course, for me, it's just an introduction, but it is a typical way to bring young people and to bring passion in the field. After that, people will discover that 3D printing is just one way to shape materials, that this is a very promising technology, but probably not applied to everything. But I think it is something we could use and capitalize on, because I think it is extremely attractive to a generation that is very used to digital design, screens, iPads, and all these tools. So I think that's maybe that's a way. That's a way.
I also want to add to this something related to the those that are practicing on job site. This was part of the question. I would like to remind that RILEM signed an international partnership with the Institute of Concrete Technology in the UK, and the Institute of Concrete and Technology trains lots of technical people on site, and they do an amazing job. But also they acknowledge the source of knowledge that comes from RILEM. So this is a great partnership with the Institute of Concrete Technology. So we do hope that the technical outcomes of our members is then somehow reach people that have their hands dirty on site, basically. I hope that this has answered the question. And I think we have talked about the environment, and I don't know if you noticed, we have also talked about young people, because when you see is there no strikes, but they are this mass of people protesting on the streets about the environment, the majority of them are young faces. So young people are very much enthusiastic about environment, but about many other topics in general. Hans, would you like to tell us something more about our young members in RILEM?
Yes, thank you. I will do that. But before I do that, I'd like to tell Nicolas that also in South Africa, we have concrete canoe races. So we are up there. Yeah, let me tell you why we, well, let me give you the motivation behind us developing this youth initiative. And I'll do that by starting to talk about myself. When I was a young guy many years ago, I was lucky that my supervisor for my master's and PhD was Mark Alexandra. And many of you know Mark Alexandra. And of course, it was him who suggested that I join a RILEM TC when I was a PhD student back in 2002. And then he also sent me to my first RILEM week. That was 2003 in Lisbon. And Mark couldn't make it, so he asked me to represent him on the standing committees. And there I was sitting, young and no experience, among all these big guys and big ladies who were discussing problems of RILEM strategies. And the main problem that they discussed in 2003 was, how can they attract more young people? How can we get young people to attend RILEM? And I thought, well, that's so easy. Look at me, I'm here. All you need is a supervisor who has the academic development of the young person at heart. Introduces that person to RILEM, pays them a ticket to attend a RILEM event, and there they are. And then I thought about all those senior people, where are your students? You should have not sit here and dwell about how to involve them. And when I got more involved over the years in RILEM, this question of attracting young people came up again and again. So this was one of the continuous topics that we had to discuss. And the first thing I thought we should change when I became DAC chair about 2 years ago is to find a way to attract young people. So I sat down with one of my PhD students, one of my young people, to actually find out what is the problem, or not what's the problem, but how can we involve them more? How can we motivate them more? How can we give them opportunities? How can we facilitate them participating in RILEM? And that student I spoke to was Joanitta, who's now the chair of the RILEM Youth Council. And over many coffees, we discussed this activity. And it turns out that young members are facing quite a few challenges. So many are not introduced by their supervisors or by their mentors to join RILEM. And that I can't understand. If we have senior RILEM members in this meeting listening, and they have PhD students who do not know about RILEM, who haven't been motivated to join a RILEM TC, then I think there's something that can be improved. Another problem that is quite additional is that many have few funds to attend events, especially students who are not from Europe. Now that is changing because now most of the TC meetings are online. So it's actually increasingly easy to attend meetings. When we started this discussion 2 years ago, it wasn't easy because it was pre-COVID, well, just pre-COVID. But I think mostly it's a mindset. These young people often don't know what they can contribute. So when they sit in a TC with all these experts whom they cite, whose papers they read, what can they contribute? Who are they to be part of a TC? So it turns out it can be quite intimidating. to contribute to a group of experts when you don't feel that you are an expert. And lastly, there is no sense of belonging for many of the young people, also because of that reason, because they don't have a young community within RILEM. So we decided to change that. And we sat mostly in this office that I'm sitting now, and we thought, how can we bring more young people to RILEM? And this is when we came up with the idea, which is now called the RILEM Youth. And the aims behind that are to encourage youth participation in RILEM technical activities and educational activities, to increase the awareness of courses and events sponsored by RILEM, and mostly also to create local and regional networks between emerging researchers to increase the visibility and their access to RILEM. To support the development of young members towards contributing in influential positions in RILEM, and also showcasing and celebrating the achievements of the RILEM youth. So this is what we're trying to achieve. And I will leave it up to Joanitta to talk to us about what has been achieved. And I can just confirm this group is really exciting. We had this idea in 2020 at the RILEM Week in Sheffield in 2020. This idea was approved by the Bureau. And only last year, 1 year ago, in 21, was the RILEM Youth Council formed. And they've been incredibly active, and they've made such a difference. They've attracted so many young people. And now it's up to us to give them a home, to make them feel valued, to make them contribute, to make them have an impact in what we are doing. And yeah, I think it's quite exciting. And I'm also very excited about the Youth Council. And let me stop there.
Joanitta, I think then it's your turn to talk to the microphone.
Thank you very much, Daniela, Hans. I think from the explanation that Prof. Beushausen has just given, you can tell that this discussion has come a long way. From the very beginning, it was very clear to both himself and I that the problem of attracting new young members could not be tackled by just 1 or 2 people, and we needed a whole cohort of people. So this is how the RILEM Youth Council came about, and currently they are 11 members on the Youth Council. These 11 members were chosen based on the different regions of the world as divided by RILEM, and those are the 10 regions. And then the 11th member is decided by the chair of the DAC committee. And this is because the RILEM Youth Council is actually a subcommittee of the Development Advisory Committee, and therefore we are not a standing committee of ourselves, rather we work in conjunction with the DAC. Now, we received our mandate at the beginning of 2021, and we actively started working on this in February 2021. And our 2 main goals for that year was, first of all, to increase membership, but also to increase participation in TAC and EAC activities. And this is quite important because you don't just want to attract members who sit in RILEM and actually do nothing, but in order to keep the young people involved and engaged with RILEM activities and therefore have that succession going, it was clear from the very beginning that it's quite important to make sure that the young members who are joining are actually participating in EAC and TAC activities. So for our first year, which officially ended in February 2022, we were very active at sending email communications to as supervisors to ask their young members to join. This was quite a lengthy and detailed process. We created an Instagram account to make the media that RILEM shares more relatable to the young people, because RILEM already has LinkedIn and Facebook and so forth, but realized that maybe the young people were not really reading or getting access to the information that RILEM was putting out through these channels. And therefore it was decided that maybe we should create an Instagram account. And from all these activities, when we checked our numbers, we actually increased the young membership by about 600 members. And obviously, this is not only due to the activities of the RILEM Youth Council, but of RILEM as a whole, including Daniela's work as the implementation manager, but also with Judith and the rest of the Secretariat. I think we have been pushing for the first year to increase the membership. And now for the upcoming year, the RILEM Youth Council wants to focus more on engaging the RILEM youth. Now that we've increased the number significantly, we want them to engage with RILEM activities. And our first initiative for this year is to set up a RILEM youth community peer-to-peer webinar. Prof. Scrivener has already spoken about the Rock and Talk webinars, which are fantastic at the moment. But when we had the strategic workshop last year, a large part of the RILEM youth community felt like those were top-down webinars. And it was brought up that perhaps it would be a good idea to have lateral webinars where a PhD student was presenting their work to another PhD student. This was more because there are certain details that perhaps the youth might feel intimidated asking the more senior members of RILEM about, but then if a peer was doing the same presentation, they might feel a little bit more comfortable asking the minute details of what was being investigated. We wanted to focus on things like methodologies and techniques and less on conclusions and results, because sometimes it can be challenging figuring out the mini details of your own research work if you are the only person doing that work in your laboratory, for example. So we will have our first webinar in May, and this is going to be organized by Surinder, who represents the Southeast Asia region. And the webinars will actually be organized by a specific region at a time. So for example, Surinder from India will organize the webinar, which will be presented by a RILEM youth community member from that region. And then the webinar might move to Europe, where our representative from Europe, Magda, will ask 2 RILEM youth community members in that region to present their research work, and then it will move to the next region and so forth. And we are going to have these every 2 months. So not every month like the Rock and Talks, but every 2 months. And this is just so that we can showcase the work that our RILEM youth community members are doing, because we thought that was really, really important as well.
Thank you, Joanitta. On this topic, I would like to say something. For those that are not aware of, the RILEM Youth Council members were elected through the help of the regional conveners of RILEM. That means 12 people around the world were asked to nominate some students that were potentially interested in participating to this youth council. And so the youth council was formed, and you have to imagine 12 people meeting online. They've never met before in person. They come from different parts of the world. They have different cultural background, different language, and they also research background, because as you know, RILEM umbrella is very wide. So they all work on different topics, and it's amazing how much this group of people managed to achieve and how they became a team. So chapeau to the RILEM Youth Council, because they really did a great work considering where they started from. I can see that there are a couple more questions related to the previous topic, but I would like to, before putting on the table these questions, I would like to finish this conversation, because Hans presented a little bit the motivations behind the establishment of the RILEM Young Forum, and Joanitta told us about the achievement of the RILEM Youth Council. Nicolas, what is the future of RILEM Young members?
Well, the pressure is on RILEM now, because after the initiative of Hans and Dak a few years ago, and all the activities and achievement of the RILEM Youth Council in the last 2 years, I would say, last 18 months, we've seen a very strong increase in our young RILEM members. So now it is time, I think, for RILEM to clearly define the way we can help them. We can help them to get integrated. We can try to ease the typical journey that each of us went through in RILEM. And there is a lot of thinking going on and discussion, so I won't go into the details here, but some aspects are non-geographic dependent, non-cultural background dependent. Some of us are. So some things like motivations and desire to integrate the integration are universal. some other things, access to really high-level equipment, possibility of traveling are very dependent on the country where you do your research and on your supervisors. So RILEM is trying to find a way to support these young students, taking into account the diversity of our young members. And I will give two examples. The first one is travel support. So there's already an initiative launched some 2-3 years ago to support some young members travel to the RILEM week and be able to easily attend, easier, or technical committee meetings. So this is something we're thinking about. We have the budget to do this. We just have to find a way to implement this properly and to make it a fair process. And we are considering as well to potentially open this support to external partners or corporate members of RILEM who would like to get involved in this young initiative. The other thing that we're thinking about is mentorship. Hans told his story. He was lucky to have very lucky, because Alexandra was president of RILEM. So that's a very good way to enter the association. But when your supervisor is not that involved, or when your supervisor is not that connected, one way to get introduced in some technical committees in an easier way is probably to get a specific name of a person who would help you, support you, introduce you to people. And TAC has been discussing this kind of initiative. I think it is one of the mission of RILEM. We propagate knowledge as well by training. And I think that in the achievements of our technical activities, of course, we produce papers, we produce state-of-the-art conference proceedings, but student mentorship is as well, I think, an extremely important aspect of the RILEM outputs. So that's what we are working on. Of course, this concerns all standing committees of RILEM, all chairs, and of course, RTC chairs, but more than anything, the RILEM Youth Council. So that will be the very strong activity for us, very important activity in the coming year. And we need to go fast, because young people
don't stay young forever.
Yeah. And they're not as patient as we become when we get older.
Thank you, Nicolas. Before we move to the next topic, I would like to take one question from the audience. Karen, maybe you might address this question. Could RILEM and Globe consensus become visible at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt in November with something sparkling?
Well, oh gosh, this is a very difficult answer, because, you know, these COP events are a nightmare. I've participated in 3 or 4 now. There's so many things going on at so many different levels, and let's be clear, you have no chance to be involved in the center of things. It's all side events and what's going on. I think the chance we have now is through you know, contacts we had from participating in the TED meetings, from working with Global Cement and Concrete Association. It now seems possible. It's not decided, and it won't be decided till really a month or so before the event, that cement and concrete may be a main focus of the next COP. If that is the case, and you know, if we maintain these alliances with people like Global Cement and Concrete Association, we may have a chance to get this in a high-profile side event. But I mean, this is all a real long shot. We're doing our best, you know, it's anybody's guess, because these things are really a zoo. These really are a zoo.
Thank you, Karen. Judith kindly remind me that we only have 20 minutes left, and there are more questions popping up. I really would like to take this one before we move to the next topic. Joanitta and Hans, maybe you might be able to answer this question. Thanks for excellent work and very eloquent presentation of the RILEM Youth Council. Have you thought of providing pitch videos that individual groups could play at group meetings, apart from making comments themselves? Would you like to say something about this proposal, this idea?
I can start. I would like to say, as a true supervisor, I'm passing the question on to Joanitta.
I'm not sure I understand what pitch videos are.
Maybe something that you can record. I'm not sure the question either, but maybe something that you can record and be there on a database so that then individual RILEM members can take. Anyone can use.
Apart from the webinars that are being proposed, there's also an education platform online that the Educational Activities Committee is planning on. And this will not just be a database with videos only, but with other source materials as well that anybody can access at any time and can use at their own free will. It's not as rigid and as constraining as, let's say, a RILEM course would be. But this is still in development with the Educational Activities Committee.
Well, if I may, I mean, knowing Robert, I think that what he meant is that what you said, Joanitta, was very convincing. Would it be possible to have this type of speech provided by young people in RILEM so that it can be broadcasted to PhD students in various research groups around the world?
Oh, yes, I understand. Thank you.
I'm not sure, but I think this is what Robert meant.
In fact, Robert now is clarifying. I would be referring to a 3 to 5 minute video to motivate students to look up for information you have already that you have already. And then, Nicolas, yeah, it seems that you...
Yes.
I know, Robert.
Yes, we would like to create such a video that we can play at the beginning of each webinar that we present, and also make this available on our social media channels such as YouTube and Instagram, so that whoever wants to make use of it can do so. Yes.
And can I say that a draft of this video is ready, has been done already? Oops, I said it. Anyway, it's a very active council, as I said. Alejandro, I would like to leave your question for later on if we have time, because as Judy reminded us, we are running almost out of time and would like to cover a few more topics. Hopefully we have time to answer this later on, or if not, maybe it's something to be added to the DAC agenda in September. So Hans, I was very interested in your comment as a young PhD student attending a meeting. It happened probably to many of us, and it happened to me as well. When I was a PhD student, the late notice of my PhD supervisor, I cannot go, you have to go. So attending this meeting, and it was the situation with a room full of men, much older than me. And I was very much intimidated, but not only because I was a young PhD student, but also because I was a female PhD student. Karen, do you think, have you lived anything similar? or Alexandra?
Yeah.
Or Nele?
I mean, I think it's important to see how far we've moved with RILEM. So, I mean, I don't know how many of you remember the photo that was right at the beginning of this conference of the creation meeting. It was all men. There was a token picture of a few women, but I think they were probably wives at the social events from the kinds of clothes they were wearing. So, you know, it really was an all boys club. And even when I was first involved, the first RILEM conference I attended was in 1987. It was actually called the first RILEM International Conference. It was very much, you know, a sort of still a club of old boys. The general council who voted on TCs, etc., were not really the scientists. They were often, you know, kind of directors of international labs like EMPA and things like that. I mean, I don't mean to say these people are not scientists, but what I mean is they're not usually active researchers. So particularly since I kind of rejoined RILEM after I came back to academia in 2001, there's been huge changes, and you know, these were written about a lot in the book but that Mark Alexandra put together. So I think RILEM's now, you know, I mean, as far as gender concerned, I think we're not far off parity on the screen here, especially if our great Secretary General and Assistant put on their screens. But, you know, I think now we have a good inclusivity. We've just been talking about being more inclusive to youth, and I think this is the trend we need to continue.
Thank you, Karen. And Enrico, would you have some numbers to share on this matter? Do you have any figure as TAC chair?
Yes, this is something that was discussed also during the last strategic meeting last year. So we looked at the numbers, and so the situation in terms of membership, it's that we are around 70% male and 30% female, which might look, let's say, far from 50-50, but we should ask ourselves, what should we refer to? Meaning that the population in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics is not 50-50, is actually roughly 70-30. So I would say that now RILEM is representative of the population in STEM, or not to say in the building sector. So at least, let's say, our membership is representative of this. Then we also asked ourselves whether RILEM could be one of the bodies, entities trying to change the situation, but let's say reaching a 50-50% in overall STEM or building sector, unfortunately, is something that goes beyond our possibility as a scientific society. And this is in terms of membership. Then we also asked ourselves whether in terms of, let's say, leadership, so people that have a role in RILEM offices, so what is the situation? And we saw that we are actually doing better than that, meaning that, for instance, if we look at the roles of chairs of the standing committees, so if we consider also the RILEM Youth Council that has recently been established, so the situation would be like 2 and 2. Then, of course, every year, not every year, but depending on the change in this role, so this number could change because it's a small number. But then if we look at the cluster conveners, then again, it's 6 cluster conveners that are in TAC, and the situation at the moment is 3 and 3. Then if we enlarge to the TAC chairs and so on, so the situation is maybe a little less balanced, but still, at least also if we look at the how things change over time, so we are going in the right direction, I think. And I think this is also demonstrated by the medals that we award. So again, if we look back to history, so for the Robert Lermit medals, so I would say that in the first decade, there were basically no, let's say, female researchers that have been awarded, while progressing with time until today. So the situation has got better and better. So now we are approaching a 25% if we consider, let's say, steps by 10 years. And actually the new decade has started with 2 female awardees. So again, this seems to be something good. And if we consider the Colonetti medals that were established more recently, so in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, then again, here the situation is probably better, meaning that we are reaching that 30-70% of female and male that we mentioned earlier. So again, let's say this situation is representative of the population that we consider. So, and on the contrary, I think this is good because in the end, the medals should only be based on excellence. And so if in this case, the numbers were very, very different, like, I don't know, 50% or 70%, female and male, maybe could be a sign that there's something artificial behind, while in this case, I think it's the best demonstration that, again, the best researchers, independently of male or females, are awarded. So again, in summary, I think the situation is getting better and better. At least we do what we can. So I think Enrico. This is good.
It's good to know. Joanitta, would you like to very briefly add something on this topic as young and female researcher?
I would like to say that I'm very grateful that my experience in RILEM so far has been very different from Prof Scrivener's when she first joined. I do not feel that RILEM is a men's club. I think this question should rather perhaps be rephrased to what can RILEM do for me as a young researcher? And in that regard, perhaps the focus should move away from gender and more towards perhaps geographical and cultural diversity. And in terms of that, then I would say what RILEM can do is perhaps work on better representation, inclusion, and recognition of the work that has been done by researchers who are outside of Europe and North America. Yeah.
Great words. Thank you, Joanitta. And this is very useful for me to move into the next topic, because we talk about young RILEM members, we talk about female RILEM members. As you might know, RILEM works with the geographical area, and we have fantastic regional conveners that help us to understand what's happening in different parts of the world. RILEM is no longer a European-oriented association, but is an association that is international, and it works every day to be more and more inclusive. Hans, would you like to tell us something about the discount in the RILEM membership fees depending on geographical region, and also if there is any initiative related to that?
Yeah, so we have quite well-reduced rates for certain regions in the world, and especially also for young members. So we now don't have any more students fees, but we have reduced fees for members that are young, and we define young as anyone up to the age of 35. And if you come, for example, from one of those discounted regions, then the young members fee is as small as 10 euros. Now, the problem is that we often hear that many of those young people can't even afford to pay 10 euros as a membership fee. And also, one topic that has been discussed ever since I joined RILEM is the issue of free membership. Can we not give young people free membership instead of giving them a 25 euro membership fee? But if we were to give free membership, we would have hundreds of master students, PhD students who have no real interest in RILEM, who just want to have on the CV, or just let me check it out and just apply because it's for free. The administration behind it would be impossible to complete. Even I think for a membership fee of 10 euros, the administration needed to register that person as a member is much more than 10 euros. So to my mind, that's my personal opinion, free membership doesn't work. What we could be looking at, and again, that's my personal opinion, we could be looking at young people who cannot afford membership to send us a short motivation, say, look, I'm interested in RILEM, I would like to contribute in a committee or just see what it's all about. Can I please join for free? And then we can look at that motivation and give that person free membership. That would be, to my mind, a very useful method to, well, reduce that financial hurdle that some people might face.
Thank you, Hans. And on this matter, finance is not always a problem to join RILEM. The official language of RILEM is English, and we noticed in the past that this could be an obstacle for someone interested in joining RILEM, but feeling deviated with the intention of joining RILEM. Nele, would you like to say something about this? Has DAC done anything recently?
Yeah, that has been changed quite a bit, actually. So yeah, RILEM is really recognizing the importance of those regional activities. Like it was mentioned, there are the regional groups, actually 10 regional groups with their own convener. You've also mentioned that RILEM membership is increasingly becoming more global and shifting to regions outside of Europe. So I think it's important to take into account that regional diversity. Also in the TC topics, actually, there can be focus on topics that are quite local, like bioaggregates, local SEMs, for instance, rice husk ashes and so on, that are not everywhere available, but yeah, in those countries who produce rice then. We've seen also from RTL that there is now several recent publications coming from certain regions, focusing more on regional topics. And indeed, to support those more regional activities, language can be an important bottleneck for some people to convene and to share their experience in a group if they are not so fluent in English. So there has also been an evolution that this is now allowed within RILEM, but maybe Enrico wants to talk about the new, well, the new actions that TAC has taken to further make this possible.
Please, Enrico.
Yeah, no, I was trying to turn my mic on, but I was having some problems. No, yes, so this, let's say, language issue is something that has been thought about it and dealt with actually earlier than I joined TAC or so, but let's say recently, so it was, there was a discussion, and in the end we approved to have, as you mentioned, subcommittees that are run in local languages, with then, let's say, a report in English, so to be able to communicate the information, the decisions to all the TC, and generally speaking to all the association. And at the same time, as I mean, Karen knows better than me, so we have started having also webinars held in different languages, so not only English, but also, for instance, there have already been cases of seminars in Chinese that have been very successful, and I think that also Spanish seminars are in the pipeline. So again, the aim, the goal is to reach more people, which I think can be also useful to, let's say, be more capillary in reaching people, including also practitioners, and so not only, let's say, top level scientists, but also people that do the daily work in engineering, in construction, and so on. So maybe this could also be a good direction to, let's say, solve those questions that are in the Q&A. So how can we, let's say, improve the practice of construction? I think that being able to transfer all the knowledge that we produce or that we collect to everybody virtually, also using national languages could be a good way.
So any channel, maybe, any language.
Yeah, maybe I can still add to that, well, we also had some issues with regional groups asking to translate RILEM publications into a national language, and that is not always so easy or straightforward, because there might be these copyright issues, and also it's difficult for RILEM to check if the translated version is still the same as the original version. But often we find a way around. So, like, for instance, we recently allowed translation of one of the recommendations into Chinese, and then just a disclaimer had to be added with a link to the original publication, and the disclaimer would then indicate that, well, this translation has not been done by RILEM, so RILEM is not responsible for any errors in the translation. So in that way, it does become available to a wider audience in a certain region.
Thank you, Nele. 3 minutes left, and I would like to pick up one last question from the audience, as that is more a comment than a question. There is an anonymous attendee that asked about a couple of strong statements on specific topics related to, for instance, to AAM, digital fabrication, MJ carbonate binders, high alumina cements, etc., which often somewhat discourage further research on some potential solutions that are currently on the table. Can we say that such provoking speeches are also aimed at stimulating critical thinking and the building up of a systematic view for young researchers? Who would like to, John, would you like to say? Just picking up someone.
Picking on someone who, I've made strong statements about a couple of these topics in history. And I've been involved in some really interesting discussions with Karen about some of these topics as well. So, I think there is absolutely value in those who are wearing the hat that says expert on it, giving our opinion on what we think should work and what we think doesn't work. I also think we need to remember a couple of fundamental principles of, let's call it research, but really life, which is to say, when somebody whose job it is to be an expert tells you that something's impossible, sometimes that's a really good challenge. There's a slightly more flippant phrasing of that, is the best expert resist innovation because they wish to remain experts. What we need is I think we need an unvarnished view of the things that we think are good ideas and the things we think are terrible ideas, because if those of us who spend our time thinking about what is a good idea and what isn't conclude that everything is a good idea and we need to do everything. That's not really helpful guidance in framing a research roadmap, for example. I do think this needs to be balanced. I'll give the example of myself. I have historically, publicly and loudly been critical of 3D printing. I'm also involved in several projects that include some 3D printing work because it's a really useful way to, I'd say, as a flagship project and as a pointy end architectural thing, I think there's interesting value in it, and there's a lot of really interesting science to be done in there that can flow down and benefit other aspects. And I would use the example, the analogy there of a Formula One car. You wouldn't drive a Formula One car for sustainability purposes, but the kinetic energy recovery systems they develop for those flow down into consumer technology. Same way we develop some of the clever rheology work to look at 3D printing, which is it's a really nice architectural application. Is it going to be used in 3D printing every house in my neighborhood? I personally don't think so. But does the rheology that we learn while we're studying that help us build every house in my neighborhood? I hope so.
Thank you, John. I'm afraid that I have to stop here because it's 5:31. We are 1 minute late. Just to conclude, the feedback that I had from interviewing the past RILEM presidents is most of the time they mention the same concept, that the reason why they love RILEM is because they find it a platform where they can freely discuss technical issues. So I think that those provocative speeches, they are be taken as a nourishing way of continuing the conversation. In a way that is always very friendly, and this is the characteristic of RILEM. So I don't know if, I think I forgot to introduce myself when we started this session, but many of you know me, but I would like to conclude introducing myself. I'm Daniela Ciancio, I'm the RILEM Implementation Manager. What we tried to achieve today was to address many of the topics that were discussed during the strategic workshop last year. And we thank again all RILEM members that took place to that workshop. And many of these ideas have been implemented. They are still implemented. They are still discussed. So everything has been taken on board and looked after. And I think now I have to give the microphone to Ravindra Gettu,